Yeah, cool it for 1 second, man. Hello again. Brett Premack, Jazz
Hello.
Video Guy Live, Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. Today we're going to talk about some of the great jazz concerts that happened in New York City in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that were produced by my guest today, Julie Lokin. Let's see if we can get
Hi,
Julie
Brett.
up here. Hey, Julie.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
System audio. Julie, can you speak?
Hi, Brett.
Okay, we're not getting any audio from Julie here. Julie, can you speak?
Hi.
Uh-oh,
You hear me?
I'll tell you what, until we fix this problem, I'm going to play something,
You know what?
a video by Charles Mingus, because one of the great concerts that Julie Lokin produced was Charles Mingus. Charles Mingus returning to the New York concert scene. So let's open with Charles Mingus, then we'll come back with our guest, Julie Lokin.
Where's the wine? Now pull it. No, for my neck. Wait a minute, let me tie it first. I got here. I remember my daddy when he came, and my mother. They came together, and I dug where they was. I said, Jesus, Moses Christ, let me out of here and tell the people what my father and mother experienced together. Wow. Hey Tom, you was hipping that. You like them shorter they come, the better they fall, huh? Yeah, well, I got one of them too, you know. But the thing about it is that I was thinking of my daughter. I saw a couple of kids about 13, 14 years old. She's only 5, but I was thinking some kids with their grandma and grandpa walking down the street, going to buy some clothes. Well, it seems cool, like, you know, like a little kid gonna show her legs and things, you do. That's expected, but when you find adults still doing it, and they know they got rapes and things going in society, the society got Playboy magazines and Smooth magazines where they show titties with no pimples, broads don't have no blood in their veins. That's another story. Yeah, it's pretty hell, I gotta lose that. I would've lost that if I had my school. Oh, let me get it again. Tom probably work it out. Yeah. Hey, what's the wine, man? You can have some too. I got a right to give my daughter some wine. She been drinking wine all her life, you know. Some cat be thinking when they take my daughter out to get her drunk and baller, they. She's drinking one at the table. You remember Fifth Avenue? Those were the good old days now. The Cadillac, chauffeur, limousine, all that. You miss it? Yeah. I don't. It was a good game while it went on. A lot of fun.
I like it because you know that white Shay when me and Eric sleep, but not the door. I liked it, so that's why I missed it. I want to move back.
You do? You want to get back. If you dig Fifth Avenue, Sutton Place, that's where you're going to live. I mean, if I got to kill somebody to get you there, I'll kill him. You dig it? That sounds funny, don't it, to be saying that. What do you think about it? I mean, when I'm in the army, like, you know, you go to war, people kill for locations, right?
I know.
So, man, if I go to join the army and kill some people, you know, legal.
I remember I was a little baby, I was in peace and quiet.
Yeah.
Without...
That was a neighborhood. It was like that in Harlem, too. Remember you lived in Harlem? You know, I'm on the Compassion White, you know. I mean, she may be for that, I know. She's whiter than, what's that guy from Harlem? The minister, Clayton Powell? Is he white? I'm not sure, but I know that she's whiter than her mama's whiter than he is. And he's whiter than most white people. Clothes.
Yeah, a little taste of Tom Reitman's movie, Mingus. Let's see if everything's working. Julie.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
I'm good, and I'm very flattered that you've asked me to do this, given all the great musicians that you've been interviewing, and I never studied music. I don't know anything about the technical part of music.
You might not know anything about the technical part of it, but you know a lot about producing this music because your new audience's productions produced some of the great jazz concerts. And one was the Mingus concert. I believe that was your first major concert as new audience's productions. Could you tell us the story about how you came to work with Mingus?
I had two very close friends, Art Wiener, who later became my business partner, and another friend, Seth Willinson, and the three of us were big fans of Mingus and jazz, and had done concerts in school, at college. And the three of us decided to, Mingus hadn't been on the scene in many years, and we decided to pull our money and see if we could get Mingus to do a concert. And we had, our only experience was as students. And around that time, early 70s, Mingus's autobiography, Beneath the Underdog, had just come out. We contacted his publishing company, and they put us in touch with Susan Mingus, who put us in touch with Columbia Records, and voila, we had made the connection. And this time the three of us were in our 20s, and very enthusiastic and probably a little naive, but they got caught up in our youthful enthusiasm and said, "So you guys want to do a concert? Okay, what did you have in mind?" And I said, "Well, it's sextet." And they said, "Well, what if it was a big band?" And I said, "Whoa, okay. Who's going to pay for that?" And they said, "Well, we will. We'll pay for the concert with the big band. You pay for the sextet, and we'll record it." And this was a major thing because there hadn't been very many major jazz concerts. The show was going to be at that time Philharmonic Hall, which later became Avery Fisher Hall, which is currently Geffen Hall. And so we pooled our meager bucks, we put it together, and we sold out. And it was quite an event. Everybody was there. Ornette Coleman, Stan Getz, the other artists that were on Columbia Records, George Wein was there. This was before George had brought the Newport Festival to New York, but he was curious to see what the audience was, and the fact that we sold out, I think, encouraged him to do his festival starting in the summer. And by the way, Mingus had a bad rap. People thought of him as being an angry, not so nice person. We found the complete opposite. He couldn't have been more cordial, more accepting. He was, again, taken with us and what we were doing, and he was a pussycat. He was great.
Did you present Charles Mingus in any other concerts, Julie?
We did. We did several. We did not only in New York, but we did shows in Washington, D.C., and Boston. And it was kind of a beginning because until that point, Mingus was not that much of a concert attraction, maybe some of the European festivals, but not here. But taking basically a club act and putting him on a concert stage was a big to-do, and other people were watching to see what we did. Anyway, we sold the show out, and we immediately booked 2 more dates at Avery Fisher Hall. We booked, the next one was with Miles about 6 or 8 months later, and then we did a folk music concert to change it up a little with Phil Oakes, Doc Watson, and David Bromberg. And so we weren't just jazz, we were doing the kind of stuff that none of the major concert promoters were doing. We were kind of, being young and close to the music, we kind of had our finger on the pulse of what people wanted to see. And many people wanted to go to a concert hall rather than, at that time, smoky clubs filled with a lot of people drinking and noisy. But the concert hall was a nice experience, so that started us in business.
Now, Julie, you produced a couple. You produced a couple of concerts when you were in college at Hunter College. You did Stan Getz and the Focus recording with the Eddie Sauter arrangements, and you also did the MJQ. But with Mingus at Philharmonic Hall, you're front and center in big-time showbiz. What were the initial challenges?
Well, of course, everyone's always nervous about money. You have no idea if you're going to sell the tickets or not. And so lo and behold, we did it. Also, this was before the internet and before computers, and it was hard to get the history. It was hard to get information about how artists did in other cities and other venues. So it was a risk, a major risk. And we wound up doing okay. And we weren't, by the way, we did lots of jazz, and that's my favorite music, and that's what I listen to, I would say, 90% of the time. But we did concerts with non-jazz artists as well, also kind of a little bit under the radar, artists who weren't all that visible at that time. And we did very well. We did a lot of blues. We did folk music. We tried to change it up a little. My former business partner Art Wiener is very creative that way. We combined Weather Report with the Louis Falco Dance Company. It was try to mix up the arts a little bit.
Now those are the pre-internet days. How did you publicize the concerts? How did you get people in the house?
Well, I know as a kid growing up, my parents would send me out to get get bagels in the Sunday Times late Saturday night, and I'd come back because I had to get that section too, the arts and leisure section, to see what was going on, and that became the focus of most of our marketing. The New York Times on Sunday, the Village Voice on Wednesday. This was before Time Out, but there were other jazz publications and music publications out there, some distributed free at record stores and whatever few clubs that existed back then. And so it was mostly that. And then as time went on, we developed a mailing list. We were able to get the names from the box office of people who had bought tickets. And even there, it was old school because we had to literally have the names put on address labels and stick them on the envelope, have a flyer printed and stick those labels onto the envelope and put stamps on. And it was quite a chore, quite an ordeal, but we had a built-in audience, people who had been to our concerts previously.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people. There's another artist I want to talk about, but first let's look at a video that features this particular artist.
Okay. daughter? Oh. Oh, wait a minute. I don't remember how to do it. I don't know how to. Yeah. Put in the audience.
Oh yeah, the saxophonist we know and love, the saxophone colossus, Mr. Sonny Rollins. Julie, how did you come to work with Sonny? First of all, he's not the easiest person to reach.
True. And even before the very first Mingus concert, we approached Sonny. And I'm not even sure how we got to him directly, but I remember Art Wiener and I went out to his apartment in Brooklyn on the other end of the Williamsburg Bridge, which has plenty of notoriety, right across the street from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. And we went up and we sat with Sonny in his apartment. And we asked him if he wanted to do a concert. And Sonny couldn't make up his mind at the time. He said he wanted to think about it and talk to his wife Lucille about it. And so when it appeared as though we weren't going to get Sonny for that first concert, we got Mingus. But later on, Lucille and Sonny got back to us, and we started doing concerts with him. And the interesting thing about Sonny is that he didn't want opening acts. He did not like an act to open for him, at least in New York. I don't know what he did in other cities, but he wanted special guests. So we did a series of shows with Sonny over the years with many acclaimed artists, Wynton Marsalis, Branford Marsalis, Terence Blanchard, who else? Charlie Bird.
Grover Washington Jr.
Grover. That was a fun show. People and we got calls at the office from, at this time we were in business now because we had some successful concerts, and we got calls saying, from writers saying, Grover and Sonny, what do you have in mind? What kind of craziness is that? And it turns out that Grover, who was known primarily in the kind of music that's now called smooth jazz, was really a great straight-ahead player. And if you look at over his catalog, you'll see that he alternated records. So there would be like a smooth jazz type album followed by a straight-ahead record, followed by a smooth jazz, and that was the way he did it. But he was a fantastic player, and of course, and they got along famously. Grover was in heaven, couldn't believe he was on the same stage with Sonny, and Sonny was very pleased having this younger popular saxophone player. I think Grover played alto and Sonny played tenor, so they complemented each other. It was quite exciting.
Well, I was there that night. It was really exciting. Those of us who weren't that familiar with Grover's playing were curious about what it was like, because you get up on the stage with Sonny Rollins, that could be a daunting experience. But Grover rose to the occasion. I think it was one of those times where they both inspired each other to play even better.
Probably, yeah. And I'm complimented to know that you were there.
Yeah, not everyone fared so well in collaboration with Sonny. I remember a Branford Marsalis Sonny Rollins concert where Branford was a little bit intimidated. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember him standing there shaking his head saying, "Oh no, I can't believe this."
but nevertheless, he gave it a shot. Um, what can I think you got to know Sonny a little bit. Sonny's a very guarded person. He
Sure.
doesn't really open up to many people, but you presented in a number of concerts over the years. What did you learn about Sonny Rollins, the man, that you can share with us?
Well, that's a hard question. I mean, we got along really well, and uh, one thing you had to be very careful on how you spoke with him. You didn't want to say anything that would get him upset. So, although we were pretty much on the same side when it came to politics or the non-jazz thing. Certainly, we didn't talk about jazz artists. Sonny, if in that series of concerts where we suggested special guests, you had to be very careful because you didn't want to intimidate him. And I have to tell you this story. Over the years, we've had some great people working in our office, either as interns or as assistants. And one young guy who worked for us early on, a fellow by the name of Ed Levine, later went on to become very well known in the internet food business. He started a website called Serious Eats, and he sold the company, and he recently wrote a book called Serious Eater, and he talks basically it's about his career in business, and he starts out talking about his working for us. Ed himself was a saxophone player. In fact, he was a student of Jimmy Heath. Anyway, I was the Sonny contact, and one day Sonny called, and Ed picked up the phone, and at one point we had talked about possibly using Stanley Clarke as a special guest with Sonny, and so Ed, rather than passing the call over to me, took it himself, and he said, "Sonny, anything new with Stanley Clarke?" And something Ed probably shouldn't have done. So Sonny's reaction was less than polite. He said, "Screw you and screw Stanley Clarke." So Ed was he said, "And don't ever speak to me again." He says this to Ed. So Ed was devastated. Number one, he was a huge Sonny fan and a saxophone player, and he just loved being in the business at that point. So he came over to me and he says, "Oh God, what do I do? What do I do?" And I said, "Have you ever met Sonny face to face?" And he said, "No." So he said, "Choose another name." So he says, "Bob." I used to be called Bob in certain dealings in college. I said, "Fine. When you come backstage and you're going to do everything you would have done anyway, you're just going to call yourself Bob." So Ed wrote this in his book, which is quite an interesting book, by the way, separate and apart from. I was flattered that he wrote about Artie in the book as well. So Sonny was, as you say, guarded, and you had to be careful what you said to him. But in general, a very polite, lovely guy, and glad we got to work with him.
Now, another one of the jazz legends that you got to work with was Miles Davis. If I'm not mistaken, the first Miles concert that you produced resulted in a live recording. Not that one.
The,
I can't find it here.
there
Oh,
was
it's
a live recording.
someplace.
Originally, it came out in Japan. It didn't come out here, and I don't even know the name of the record that it came out on. But it was pretty out there. It was in that period when he went really out. Dave Liebman was in the band, and Tume, and uh, I think Al Foster was on drums. Is that the record? I can't tell.
Yeah,
Is
Miles
that on the?
Davis in
Yeah,
concert.
it's a little blurry on my end. Uh, on the Corner had just been released, and this live concert was in support of the release of that record. But anyway, there too, the show sold out. It was a great success. Um, Personally, I was not into that music. I got into it later on. But following later on, we did a concert with Miles at Carnegie Hall, which um, which came out later as Dark Magus. And again, for people into the avant-garde type Miles, that's like a very important recording.
Now I know
We
that
also
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was also going to say later on in the '80s we did a concert, a double bill with Miles and BB King, and there too the writers were curious, and I got many calls in the office saying why that, and it turned out that it made a lot of sense musically because they were both about the same age, and BB took the blues in one direction, and Miles took the blues in another direction. And originally, we had two shows, one show with an option for a second, and the first show sold out very, very fast. We put the second show on, it was a midnight show, went real fast to the point where we checked with, this was at the Beacon Theater, we checked with the Beacon, and these were Sunday night shows, Saturday night shows. It turned out that the Sunday, the next day, was available. We actually we could roll into a third show, which is pretty amazing. That's rock and roll numbers. You know, we're talking about 2,800 seats three times. So it turned out to be quite an event, and it's still one of my favorite concerts. The interesting thing is that Miles wanted to his MO was that if it was just a single show, he wanted to close the show, which is understandable. He said if it was back to back like this Saturday night thing was, where there were two shows, he wanted to open the first. He wanted to close the first and open the second so he could get out of there real fast. So anyway, that was quite an evening as well, and we got so much. You asked earlier about marketing. We didn't have to do that much marketing because the writers were so excited that we got lots of free ink, as it were, and at that time we had. You could promote a jazz show like Miles on at that time in New York. We had WNEW, which was a progressive rock station, and it was we could promote Miles on that station because that audience was so diverse. And so anyway, we did really well with those three shows.
Now, before we go to the next artist I want to discuss, we're going to look at a video. A couple of guys who just happened to play with Miles.
Oh, that's an old one.
Yeah, Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea. That I think it was like in the early '80s. They did a piano duo tour, and they played at Carnegie Hall. Did you produce that one?
I did, yeah. But originally, back when in the mid '70s, um, we put a concert on together at Carnegie Hall with Herbie and the Headhunters and Return to Forever to open. And this was with Stanley Clarke, Al Di Meola, and who am I thinking of? Lenny White on drums. And it was Al's first concert with Return to Forever. He previously, Chick had another guitar player, Bill
Bill,
Connors, who apparently didn't make the gig or left the band, and Chick had called Al at Berklee School of Music in Boston and said, "Come do the gig." And his first gig with the band was at Carnegie Hall, and it turned out to be wonderful. So the we had in the early days had a long relationship and a good relationship with each of those artists, Herbie and Chick, and I think to this day, if I called either one of them, they would be happy to hear from me. I mean, those were great days, and the music was so exciting and different.
yeah, it's hard to convey that to people today because everything is so different. But in the '70s and the early '80s, the whole fusion thing was happening. I remember when Miles came out with In a Silent Way, everyone was waiting. What's going to be next? And then Bitches Brew, and then all of a sudden Weather Report and Return to Forever, and the whole thing just exploded. I
Yeah.
mean, so did you do a lot of quote unquote fusion concerts, Julie?
Um, yeah, we did. We had limitations, especially given um, the limitations of the halls at Avery Fisher and Carnegie, because they were so geared to classical music and so averse anything popular that used a lot of sound and lights and that type of thing. So we used to have to put restrictions on the artist saying, if you want to play those halls, then you have to cut back your gear. You can't bring in rock and roll setup to those kind of halls in New York City. So, but we did, yeah, we did. Out of um, we did Weather Report, of course, and out of that came the Zavino Syndicate, and we also did Jocko's Word of Mouth Band, and we did another great show that we did. I thought it was great anyway. We co-produced with George Wein at one of the Newport festivals was Tower of Power and the Brecker Brothers. There was a lot of horns on that stage, but that was at the Beacon, and there was a little flexibility in terms of the size of the production. Nowadays, the big rock and roll bands, their production is so immense that in some cases they have two complete units so that they can leave the stage, travel for a day, and they would the two trucks would skip a day. That's how big the 2 or 3 semis full of equipment. So
Yeah, you produce concerts at Town Hall, Philharmonic Hall, the Beacon Theater, and Carnegie Hall. Where was the most difficult place to work?
well, in the early days, Carnegie probably because of the very strict union rules about what you could bring in, as I just mentioned. Also, the sound level. They had this rule about 125 decibels coming off the stage. Now, that's a very low number. I mean, probably if they some classical pieces that probably exceed that, but they're just not amplified. Anyway, it was very difficult, and it was very uh, it, anxiety producing because in some cases you felt like you were working for the stagehands. I'm sure that the local one of IATSE is not going to be happy with me saying that, but that's the way it is. Things have changed quite a bit now because, well, now there are no concerts, but Carnegie eventually, under different management, brought in their own sound system, which is in the hall, so you don't have to bring all that stuff in. They have an excellent sound system in-house, and they beefed up the lighting quite a bit as well.
Well, as we got later into the 80s and the 90s, the smooth jazz thing arrived. Let's play an artist here who is really a jazz guy, but also known in that realm.
terrible greenie. And he's picking the wrong music.
David Sanborn. You also produced concerts with Bob James, Spyro Gyro, Grover Washington, the Rippingtons. Any difference in producing those type of concerts as opposed to the straight-ahead jazz concerts?
Well, again, bringing up the issue of the production issues were always a challenge because the artists demanded so much, and we were somewhat limited. And in terms of what we could provide at the big prestigious halls. And our argument was, look, you want to play the Carnegie or the Beacon, you got to make some compromises. And at that time, MTV was still playing music, and they had the Unplugged series. So we used that argument, say, think of this as an unplugged concert. So it was more acoustic, as it were. For that, believe me, it was heavily amplified, but in their minds, it was acoustic, but that was the main problem. Well, the other problem, of course, is timing, and that we at most of the New York City concert halls, there's a 3-hour show call. In other words, you start at 8 o'clock, you got to end at 11. If you go past 11, you're into serious overtime, which can be very, very costly. So, and we would often do 3-act shows because that's what brought the people in. It wasn't only the headliner, but the other 2 acts had to stick to their time limit. And one story was one time we had Steve Kahn, the guitar player, opening on a 3-act bill, and I can't even at this point can't tell you who the other 2 acts were. But Will Lee, bass player, was playing with Steve, and Steve was. We said, look, Steve, you got to start sharp at 8 o'clock, and you got to be off 30 minutes later or 40 minutes later, whatever the time frame was. And Will Lee was nowhere to be found. We couldn't find him. He said, I can't go on without my bass player. And I said, well, look, we can, whatever time you don't go on, you have to cut your set by. And it was already a short set. Anyway, Will showed up about 20 minutes late, and it was unfortunate, but nobody was to blame except Will Lee. But again, funny stories. What can I say? But I wish I could remember who the other 2 acts were. But and one of the reasons we started doing the smooth jazz type of shows was because there was an outlet for it. We had a radio station in town, CD 101.9, and the whole smooth jazz thing was basically taking off across the country. So there was an audience for that music, and here we had to make a decision: are we going to do shows with based on our personal taste, that we're going to do shows that to please an audience? And so we wound up doing lots of smooth jazz shows. And I can't say that, I mean, you got to be selective. I can't say that I was a big fan of the Rippingtons, but they did business for us, and there was an audience for them. Grover was a different story. His music was so diverse and interesting, and Sanborn definitely. He could, in fact, he did a straight-ahead jazz tour. I think Ron Carter was in the band, if I'm not mistaken. No, Charlie Hayden. Excuse me, it was Charlie Hayden, and I can't remember who the others were, but it was pretty much a straight-ahead jazz concert. So these guys can play. They can play anything.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to Grover was an amazing musician. Another one of those cats who sadly left us much too long. Julie, you've kind of been out of the business for a while. You've worked as an EMT as of late. What do you miss about not producing jazz concerts anymore?
Well, let me tell you something. I was missing the camaraderie. A lot of friends who are on the production side as well as artists. I don't get to see people that often. Um, what I don't miss is the anxiety. I'm a much freer guy. I enjoy as you mentioned, I'm an EMT. I'm sitting out this coronavirus thing because I don't think it would be smart for me to be close to that, given my age and health issues. But I'm still active in two EMS units, basically doing. I'm on a membership committee in one unit, and I'm a quality improvement officer in another unit, and I keep up with the classes and I do what I have to do, but I'm not being very active as an EMT, and I have the utmost respect for those some of my buddies who are doing that now because it's so dangerous out there, as you know. So. Uh, Another thing I do is I've got time to travel. So for the last 6 years, my wife and I have been going to Spain in the winter, and I spent a lot of time studying Spanish with my teacher Sonia, who I think is watching in Seville right now. Hi, Sonia. so I've always loved Spanish music and Spanish culture, and I think that was one of the things that got me really interested in Chick with my Spanish Heart album and the song Spain, and we did some flamenco shows. I'm a big fan of Brazilian music, Milton Nascimento, Antonio Carlos Jobim, Gal Costa. Uh, we brought one of the Newport festivals in New York. We brought the idea to George Wein of reuniting Milton and Wayne Shorter, and that was an exciting night. They have a great record together called Native Dancer, and that was recreated on stage, and combining American jazz with Brazilian bossa nova, or the music that Milton sings.
Well, we're in a pretty weird situation right now as we do this live, and then, of course, it'll be available on demand. There are no concerts, there are no
True.
gigs. We do not
Yeah.
know what's going to happen. Have you had any thoughts about future presentation of music in a live situation, Julie?
Well, one thing that of major concern is the fact that many musicians who work from gig to gig are without money. They have no income, and they can't all of a sudden switch gears and become, office workers or postal employees or something like that. So there's an organization that's being put together now called Jazz Coalition. Dan Melnick, good friend of mine, and Bryce Rosenblum and the manager Gail Boyd are spearheading this organization called Jazz Coalition to raise money to help jazz musicians in need, which is very important. A big problem is that some of these venues, the clubs and even performing arts centers, may go under, given that through the lack of business, even though they can't present shows, they still have to pay the rent, and in some cases, employees. And in performing arts centers where previously money came from the government, there is no money for that. In fact, I noticed on the internet there's some more right-wing people are protesting the fact that there's $25 million in the current budget for the Kennedy Center, saying, why are we spending money on art? And they're cutting funding to National Public Radio and the National Endowment for the Arts. It's very sad. So as far as the future, I don't know. I just happened to read something today about all the festivals in Europe, the major jazz festivals in Europe, are canceled, and the one in Denmark is called the Roskilde Festival. It's very old; it's about 50 years old, and they postponed it and moved it to next year. And this article that I read said that they all sold out for the 2021 festival, which is pretty amazing. So hopefully there is some life, and a lot of these shows and concerts will come back. But if we're going to abide by social distancing, that's going to really hurt because it's going to cut the capacity of venues down dramatically. Theaters and clubs, you can't be on top of each other the way it used to be. So I don't know what the future is. There's part of me that feels grateful. I feel very sad about the fact that the music isn't live, and as far as I'm concerned, watching it on video is not the same thing as being in a room where the music's happening. So I don't know what the future is going to be. I know it's going to be very difficult.
Well, I don't know what the future is going to be either, but I do know one thing, and that's that people love music. People love this music. As we're doing the program today, we're getting viewers from Spain, a couple from Spain, from Russia, from Brazil. I mean, this is a global thing, this love of jazz. So somewhere, someplace, there will be live performances, but right now we can't really predict that.
I can't see. I don't see the postings on my screen. Unfortunately, I'd love to see those. And anybody asking any questions?
No, today is our first time on Facebook and YouTube simultaneously. We've had a few issues that we were able to resolve during the course of the broadcast, but the comments aren't coming over, unfortunately, so you can't see them. Do you know a place in Spain called Murcia, M-U-R-C-I-A? Julie?
I know of it. I know of it. I've never been there.
Okay, so we have Barcelona and Murcia from Spain today with us. So I want to welcome our Facebook viewers who happened to come in about half an hour to the broadcast. This will be available on demand. And I think that Julie Lokin is one of those people who's made a difference because he brought us the music in New York City. Before I knew Julie, I was at many of those concerts. The Grover Washington Sonny Rollins concert really stood out. And of course, that first Mingus concert, which luckily was recorded. Interestingly, Bill Cosby was the host of it. That's a whole other story. But so I want to thank my friend Julie Lokin for being my guest today. And Julie, any final words before we jump off with some more Charles Mingus?
No, but thank you, Brett. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for doing what you do. You're keeping the music going, and you're educating the audience. And if I could be a little part of that, I'm grateful. And I hope that people will be in touch with me directly or look at my Facebook page for New Audiences Productions. And I haven't posted anything in quite a while, but I will. And I'm glad to know that people all around the world are watching you, Brett. That's great.
Yeah, well, this is truly a global medium, Facebook and YouTube, and also jazz is a global medium. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Tomorrow, my guest will be Mark Morganelli, who's going to talk about things from the club side. He has, over the course of his career, is not only a trumpet player, but a producer and a club owner with Jazz Forum in 3 different locations. Great stories and an interesting perspective on where the clubs might be going. So once again, thank you, Julie Lokin, and we're going to go out here with some Charles Mingus.
Thank you, Brett. Say hi to Mark.
Thank you.